Republican Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri, a member of the Republican leadership who sits on the Intelligence Committee. Welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Hey, Chuck. Good to be with you.
All right, let me start with something that Senator Schumer said he was going to ask the United States Senate to do, basically to ask for a sense of the Senate and the House on this lawsuit that says it needs to be, Congress needs to intervene with this lawsuit and stop it. Would you support that?
Well, I think what he was saying was what the Congress should do is tell the circuit court what to do. I can't recall a similar time when anything like that happened. And Senator Schumer followed that by saying, you know, on health care, it's really hard to get anything done when you ask him what kind of legislative things we want to do on health care. That's clearly not going to happen. That's not what we ought to be doing this week. And Senator Schumer knows it.
But didn't this federal judge act like a legislator? And he decided on his own what the law is going to be. Isn't this a form of judicial activism? He said, well, I've decided that Congress said this is a zero tax. I've decided it's no longer a tax. That's the definition of a judge writing legislation.
Well, that doesn't mean that legislators can act like judges just because judges sometimes.
So you acknowledge in this case the judge has probably overstepped his bounds here?
You know, I think the thing to remember about the judge's ruling is it has no immediate impact. Nothing changes yesterday, nothing changes tomorrow. This will have to go through a circuit court process. Who knows if the circuit court would uphold it or not. That will either be quickly dismissed, which is one option, or a long period of time, in my view, before the circuit court deals with it. This will be another area where this health care will be used as a political issue way beyond the ramifications of one district judge making a ruling that has no immediate impact.
Well, let me tell you what the president said. The president said this was great news for America. That was his point. Do you agree with him?
I think it's basically just for America, it means we're going to continue to debate this. Health care clearly matters to people. Some of, what we had with Obamacare, as you've already called it today, was a poorly thought out plan, really poorly implemented to start with, that's had lots of negative impact on lots of families who have insurance they don't need with deductibles they can't afford. We need to be
there. If all of that is true, why have you guys failed to be able to come up with an alternative? You've had 8 years as a party to come up with some alternative that can pass.
We've had lots of alternatives. We had lots of alternatives when Obamacare passed. Letting people up to age 26 stay on their parents' insurance was a bill I filed. As far as I know, it's the only Republican proposal that was filed during that process as an independent bill. It was 4 pages, and it probably insured more people than any other single part of the Affordable Care Act did. There were lots of ideas out there. It's just the other side didn't want to listen to those ideas.
Your party can't unite on any idea, though. I mean, isn't that, if you had one, wouldn't you have a more leverage at the table?
I wouldn't say we couldn't unite on any idea, but this is a very difficult issue in a closely divided Senate. 49 senators, including me, voted to do something last year that a couple of Republican senators couldn't agree with. This is why the committee process matters. The one thing I think we would be able to unite on is Medicare for all would wind up meaning Medicare for none. If Democrats want to take that view to the American people, and seniors, particularly people who are now covered by Medicare, understand the ramifications of that, there is no way that will happen, and there's no way voters will let it happen.
Was this lawsuit necessary?
I'm not in the job of questioning what state attorney generals decide they want to do.
You have a future colleague in the Senate, Josh Hawley, who filed this lawsuit. It was probably the biggest political negative he faced, the health care issue. He had to do a lot of answering of charges on that. In hindsight, politically, was this a mistake?
Well, he won his election pretty handily, so whether that was anything that had impact on voters, I don't know. I do know that, the court case...
You don't seem enthusiastic about the lawsuit. You do seem, take it or leave it.
Well, you have to, when you challenge something like the Affordable Care Act, an attorney general in Texas doesn't have the obligation to come up with what the alternatives are. Now, Josh Hawley and I now have a different obligation than all those attorneys general had. And we continue to look for more options, more choices, more access to insurance that really meets people's needs. Things like the associated health plans that allow people in small businesses to band together. That's going to have a real impact on people that can get out of the individual market, which is always more expensive and more difficult to navigate than insurance at work. A lot more people are going to have insurance at work because of the associated health plans that the administration has put out there, and they're already beginning to work.
Are you at a point, though, that the expectation now is the Affordable Care Act is the new baseline, and whatever you do, you can't eliminate any benefit that already has?
I think you can create more options. I do think for the individual marketplace for any foreseeable future, the Affordable Care Act is going to be there. It's going to have the boundaries of the Affordable Care Act, but that's not really served individuals or families as well as other things might. We have a real opportunity here to look at this. Democrat Congress, Republican Senate, Republican president trying to find solutions to some of these problems that have now been around for at least 6 years.
If it temporarily halted this lawsuit, would you support putting a 1 cent tax, if you will, on the mandate in order to pass this judge's muster?
Chuck, I think the tax was always a stretch. Remember, the Obama administration said it's not a tax, it's not a tax, it's not a tax, until the only way it appeared that the court was going to uphold this was by them saying, okay, maybe it is a tax. And the court upheld it on that basis. Coming up with a 1 cent gimmick would not have much appeal to me.
All right, I want to ask you a couple other questions. You were the head of the Inaugural Committee as far as Congress is concerned. It has not to say you're part of the actual campaign aspect of raising money for Inaugural, but there's now this investigation in the Inaugural Committee. And the amount of money that was raised, let me put what the head of Bush's Inaugural Committee in 2005 said about Trump's Inaugural Committee. They had 1/3 of the staff and 1/4 of the events, and they raised at least twice as much as we did. So there's the obvious question, where did it go? I don't know. Look, what you saw in your role as head of the inauguration, where you just sort of said, boy, how come they don't have that many events with all the money they raised?
Well, my role in the inauguration was pretty time-consuming. I got to chair the committee. It was a great opportunity. That part of the inauguration, what happens at the Capitol, is under the control of the Congress. The funding is congressional funding. It's taxpayer money. Probably our government is never more vulnerable at any time than when you've got everybody outside in the middle of the winter on tons of plywood and lumber, and there's a lot to think about. I would say the 2 or 3 times that I interacted with that committee, normally with Tom Barrack, to just be sure they understood that what happened at the Capitol was up to us, not up to them. But he was always very good to deal with. I have no idea what they did. I will tell you, during that particular period, my time was very consumed by being sure if we ever had to get everybody off that platform for some emergency, we could get them off there quickly.
You voted for all 4 articles of impeachment against Bill Clinton. 2 of them that passed were basically lying to a grand jury and obstruction of justice. Do you regret those votes?
Not as much as I'm sure he regrets lying to the grand jury.
Do you regret the impeachment process?
I looked at Ken Starr's book. I think all of us, looking back at that, would not want to rush to anything that has all of the ramifications that impeachment has. If I was giving advice to my friends in the House, most of the chairmen I would have served with when I was in the House, my advice would be legislate, don't investigate if you want to be rewarded with the continued opportunity to be in control of the House of Representatives.
Roy Blunt, Republican from Missouri. Thanks for coming on
Thank you.
Reviews. Good to see you, sir. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.